My Lords, I'm planning in my speech today to set a context for this bill and look at some of the bigger ways forward, while my noble friend Baroness Jones of Moulsecoomb will be concentrating more on the details of the bill.
Oh, well,
Sure you will. And I begin unoriginally by noting that a year is a long time in politics. So I look back to January 2021, and in this, your Lordship's chamber, it was the second reading of the Financial Services Bill. And the noble Lord Agnew of Alton was on the front bench proclaiming with apparent pride that the UK had, quote, unwavering commitment to high-quality, agile and responsive regulation, close quote. I said in my speech that day, quote, we are a major global centre of corruption. The city is an orgy in stables, and the bill is clearly sparing in its distribution of shovels, close quote. It's clear that Greens lead in recognising problems and others follow eventually, and we offer solutions. I've joined with many others, and I note the leadership particularly of the noble Lord Wallace of Saltaire, in calling for the end to golden visas, a long disgraceful saga threading through the governments of three political hues that eventually, very late in the day, have finally been cut off. Now, the noble Lord Agnew is no longer sitting on the front bench. It was the government's refusal to tackle another, largely unconnected corruption issue that led to his dramatic resignation. Our issue with corruption is clearly not contained to one sector, area or type. Corruption is a pervasive UK issue. We are today like a nation that's a guilty individual hastily pushing an illicit lover out the window of their bedroom as the world's media comes storming through the front door. This bill being scanty garments hastily donned in ill order. The world, its attention focused particularly just down the road at the City of London, is not going to be very clearly deceived about our state of disarray. According to the International Monetary Fund, as much as 5% of the world's GDP is laundered money, and only 1% of it is ever spotted. Collectively, developing countries have lost $16.3 trillion to illicit leakages since 1980. A very, very significant chunk of that flows just down the road from here. We can see the Thames, but it's dwarfed by a far dirtier, deadlier stream of corruption, as the Right Reverend Prelate, the Bishop of Leeds, noted. Now, today, I think it is worth noting, we are here today because of President Putin. It's the actions of President Putin that forced our government to react. We shouldn't be reacting. We should have been proactive many years ago. As the Right Reverend Prelate said, we shouldn't have needed this spur. Yet clearly the government is like a horse that's been balking at the gate, not wanting to be pushed away from a lush, tasty pasture, even when it's been made deadly ill with the colic of ill-gotten gains. Now, colic is not a contagious disease, but our corruption is. If we look at the state of Russia and how it got to be what it is today, you go back to under the time of President Yeltsin. It was the guidance for reshaping the post-Soviet economy was largely handed to Western lawyers, accountants, business people. The neoliberal market model was the way forward, the Russians were told, that actively encouraged what amounted to a 19th century style robber baron dominated Wild East, what had been the Soviet era senior apparatchiks, almost seamlessly switching to champions of the market, some of whom we still see today very close to home. Of course, the oligarchs bear responsibility for their choices and actions, but so do those who encouraged and enabled them. The sicknesses of our society are many. We often talk about our productivity problem and our labour crisis. But what if the bankers, instead of serving the oligarchs, were putting their talents to optimising the outputs of our manufacturing? What if the accountants were tracking the movements of nutrients and microorganisms with the aim of producing good, healthy food? What if the lawyers were caring for our old and our sick? I'm indebted to the Noble Lord Seeker, and I'm very sorry we won't be hearing from him shortly, to the figure that there are around 400,000 professionally qualified accountants in the UK. That's the highest per capita figure in the world. We have an economy that focuses on spreadsheets, not on the quality of our society. And what have we done in terms of delivering the rule of law? It's frequently claimed that we're at the centre of the camp defending it, but actually we've been leading its absolute undermining. Now, there's a book out, published actually tomorrow, titled Butler to the World: How Britain Became the Servant of Tycoons, Tax Dodgers, Kleptocrats and Criminals. This is definitely in the contest for the best ever timed publication of books. Now, the author, Oliver Bullough, notes that we don't just need changes to legislation. We need changes to enforcement, as many noble lords have noted, but also changes to culture and changes to politics. In 2016, the UK government itself estimated that the amount of corrupt money flowing into the UK had reached £100 billion a year. Transparency International has identified at least £1 billion in suspect property bought from Russian money alone. But the flow isn't just of money. Of course, there's been a massive flow into the West of Russian oil and Russian gas. The trashing of our planet and our economic system and our political system are all intimately interlinked. The impoverishment of many, the destruction of our environment, is linked to the benefit of the few. Now, I've got some specific proposals and questions for the Noble Lord, the Minister. Firstly, will the government now reconsider its plan for free ports? The studies by the European Parliament and the Financial Action Task Force, among others, have shown that the secrecy and extraterritorial nature of free ports are a magnet for money laundering and tax evasion. These are the kind of things we're supposedly trying to act against. Secondly, in terms of the Russian targets for these sanctions, we're talking about an opt-in system, identifying those oligarchs that are apparently close to Putin and his regime. Well, Robert Reich, the former US Secretary of Labour, now a Professor of Public Policy at the University of California, has suggested that there should be frozen all of the offshore holdings of Russian nationals in excess of $10 million. That would affect, he estimates, 10 to 20,000 Russians, who, by definition, are those who have benefited most from Putin's rule. How about an opt-in system instead of an opt-out one? A third question. We are, of course, due to the prod that led us to this chamber today, focusing on the Russians. But what about many other parts around the world? And I think it was the Noble Lord, Lord Carlisle, who referred to the vicious actions of the Saudi state and our friends in the Middle East and arms customers. What are we going to be doing to look at where Saudi money is in London and where it's come from? And I would also stress to the Noble Lord the Minister that the problem is not only people in the global south or places that speak different languages or have different cultures to our own. Tech billionaires, mining magnates, their overweening wealth, tax dodging, exploitation of their workers. Illegally acquired wealth is far from our only problem. Unexplained wealth orders are meant to tackle that. I would suggest we also need all too well explained wealth orders. You might call it a wealth tax. And many noble lords have focused on the need to far better fund our enforcement of our laws. Perhaps some of the money from a wealth tax could go towards helping to fund that. Now, a final practical question. The proposed registration will only apply to property bought in England in the last 20 years, in Scotland since 2014. Why not look at what's concealed by previous arrangements? Is it to be considered laundered clean rather than just more dirty washing? Maybe there's not much desire to go further back. How much wealth of people in a place like this has deeply corrupt origins, stolen in the colonial and post-colonial periods?
Hands up.
So, finally, my Lords, Greens can do nothing but support this bill. It's a small step in the right direction. You can, however, sail even a modestly scaled super yacht through the gaps in this bill. We need to see, and I would thank the Noble Lord the Minister and his colleagues for a useful briefing that focused on the need for a second bill as soon as possible. But we need much, much more, and an acknowledgement that the problem isn't simply the narrow legal framework or individuals. The problem is our system.